Hello, Ken Follet. I'm Ana Iorga. It's very nice to have you on this interview. Thank you for accepting this meeting with us.
My pleasure.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I have not got the virus. I have survived a year, and nobody in my family has got it. So
oh, God.
We've been lucky.
Yeah, this is good news. What are you working at right now?
Right now, I'm reading the proofs of my next book, Never, which is coming out in November. It's the last thing we have to do. After it comes back from the printer, I have to read it one more time to see if there are any mistakes in printing. And to tell you the truth, it's not my favorite job. On the other hand, I'm finding the book quite exciting.
And I know that you take time to correct and for editing also your draft, and you also give specialists your draft to read it again and to have their opinion, even in this I don't know latest moment before you publish it. It's important for you, isn't it?
I think it's important to get the details right. If people find, when we're reading, if we find a mistake in the book says something that we know can't be true, then we notice it, don't we? And we stop and we think that's wrong. The author made a mistake. And if the reader's thinking like that, the reader's not lost in the story. We say the reader has popped out of the story.
Yeah, it's a fact,
and that's
there.
That's a terrible thing, because I go to all this trouble to make sure that once you've started reading, you never want to stop.
Yeah.
And if there's a mistake, you stop. So that's one of the reasons why it's important. I also think readers like to believe that the history in the novel is accurate. They feel then that they're, as well as enjoying it, which is the main thing, they feel they're learning something.
It's important that, and it will be my question, and at a certain moment, this part with history and fiction and all the disconnection between the two of them. But because you already started to speak about Never, I want to start our discussion with Never, your latest novel that will appear in November, and we can't wait to see it and to read it. You say that when I started writing Never, I didn't know how it would end, and you won't know until the very last page. This is thrilling. So how it all started, what inspired you?
It was my study of the outbreak of the First World War that inspired me, because I studied that for a novel called Fall of Giants, and what struck me about it was that there weren't really any bad guys. You know, the whole of Europe was involved in this war, but none of the European countries wished to have this war. They all made, the presidents and prime ministers made decisions which led to war, but they didn't intend it. And they were small steps. And so that made me think, well, could that happen again? And could it happen now? And I tried to imagine a scenario in which modern leaders, European and North American and Far Eastern and Russian leaders, would all make decisions leading to a war that they did not want. And I came to the conclusion that, yes, it's very possible, and that's what the book is about.
Which are the
but maybe
today?
Maybe they'll stop it before the very end. You have to read the book.
Yeah, this is what your characters are trying to avoid, a terrible world conflict. But in your opinion, and in this novel, what are the flashpoints of today that could generate another similar terrible conflict that we had in 1914, for example? So which could lead to this nowadays?
Well, there are a lot. And I'm not going to tell you which one I've used in the book, because that would spoil the story. But for example, Taiwan. it's the biggest flashpoint at the moment. The Chinese government thinks that Taiwan belongs to China. The Taiwanese people think that Taiwan belongs to them. And both sides are very heavily armed. The Chinese are very determined and very powerful. The Taiwanese have the support of the United States, we think, although we're not really sure. And that's something that could easily explode. Then there is the border with India, the border between China and India, where at the moment they have soldiers shooting at one another and again. They're arguing about which bit belongs to China, which bit belongs to India. None of this land is very valuable, by the way. But it's the kind of thing where somebody could start shooting and there could be a really serious war.
Enough reason to start a worldwide conflict, you say, actually.
Well, no, but the point is, what happens sometimes in these circumstances is a gradual escalation. So somebody does something mild. Now, if the Indians shot one Chinese soldier, China would not bomb India, but they would do something else. They might shoot 10 Indian soldiers, and then the Indians might bomb one Chinese city. And then the Chinese might bomb 10 Indian cities. That's the way these things escalate. And it happens terrifyingly easily. And that's the drama in Never, is the way these small steps just keep leading towards what everybody dreads and nobody wants. There's a Russian point, a flashpoint involving Russia would be the Ukraine, wouldn't it?
Yeah, now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right now. And you can imagine how, okay, the Russians have forced down a British plane. Well, now, the British are very mad about this, very angry about this. Will we do anything? I don't know. But if we did something to retaliate against the Russians might do something to us, and we might be on that slope again. So there's no shortage of flashpoints. The only question is, when these crises happen, how do we deal with it? Do we manage to keep the temperature down, or does it boil up and explode?
How did you choose your characters in order to solve this type of conflict?
Well, there have to be two things. First of all, there have to be several people who are in a position to change the course of events. So they have to have some power. They may have power because one of the characters, for example, is the President of the United States.
A woman.
And there's a character who has the power to change events. Another very important character is a Chinese spy master. So he's in charge of the Chinese intelligence, overseas foreign intelligence service. So he's a very powerful person, and also he knows everything because of his job. All the information, whether it's secret or not, comes onto his desk. So they have to be in a position to change things. But the other thing is their character. They have to be the kind of people who do change things. So they have to be brave and intelligent and resourceful. And you see, you can't write a story about people who are timid and cautious and fearful, because they never get into trouble. So there's no story.
Right. If there's no.
So my characters, they have to be a little bit bold and do brave things and dangerous things.
For this novel, as well as for others, you actually spoke with this type of person that are really involved in these positions, important positions.
Oh, yes.
You make a great research for your for every novel. You're like a historian, like a journalist, a little bit of them both. When do you stop? How deep you go? When do you stop and you start writing?
Well, it doesn't really stop until the book's finished, because although I do a lot of research in the first year, when I'm planning the story, I do a lot of research then. But even when I'm writing, something happens and I need to find out. For example, a typical thing that I would have to do would be to find out what is the building like in Beijing where the Chinese president has his office. Because, you know, I might not know, and when I'm writing, I might realize, oh, I've got to have a scene in the president's office. Okay, then what is the office like? I have to say where it is, what the building looks like, and what kind of desk is he sitting at. And of course, sometimes
it happened to you to put a pause and to travel that place in order to see the building or to get inspiration for that office that you need in that moment to describe and to be very, very real in your novel?
Well, normally I would try to go and visit the place. Of course, this book has been written while we've had the virus, and so I haven't gone anywhere. However, there are, first of all, I use maps. Mm-hmm. I use the internet a lot, and there's something called Google Earth, mm-hmm. which is a way to get a satellite picture. And for this book, for Never, I used Google Earth a lot.
Because have Google Street just to visit all the...
Yes, that's right. All that stuff is very good. Then sometimes there is stuff that you just can't find out, because some of this stuff is secret, of course. So, for example, I do know where the Chinese Secret Service have their headquarters. In Beijing, I know the address, and I've looked at satellite pictures of the compound. But when it comes to the inside, I have to be a bit vague, because there aren't any pictures of the inside. Oh. The China, of course, like all secret police, they keep these things secret. They don't tell you. Oh, the boss is on the 7th floor, because they think you might want to, you know.
Of course.
So there are some things that you can't find out, but a lot of stuff you can find out enough to create an atmosphere for a place. And so, yes, in that case, if I was in the middle of the story and I realized that I had to give a very good description of a place that I had never been to, I would go there if I could. I would probably write a description based on internet information, and then after I finish the first draft of the book, I often go on a trip, and I go and look at a lot of places over a period of 2 or 3 weeks and photograph them and make notes, so that when I do the rewrite of the book, then I can put in all the authentic details that I've discovered.
So you actually go to feel that place. I know that you have done this a lot when you wrote the novels about the Middle Age and Dark Ages. Why are you so passionate about the Middle Ages? Because you traveled a lot, you studied, I don't know, you looked on documents, archives, you visited cathedrals, museums, you analyzed a beautiful tapestry I saw on your Instagram. Why do you do all this? Why do you have this passion for Middle Ages?
Well, it started with the cathedrals. I used to go and visit the cathedrals, and I liked them, and I was fascinated, and I began to think, why did medieval people do this? You know, it was very expensive. It was hard to build. And these were people who were poor. They slept on the floor. They lived in houses made of wood, and the floor was made of mud.
Actually centuries, because they built cathedrals not in a few years. They built in, I don't know, 200 or 300 years. So it took some time.
Well, it certainly, if everything went well, they could build a cathedral in about 30 years. But usually it didn't go well. So they had to stop and get some more money. And of course, all the things that go wrong with the building of a cathedral go wrong in the Pillars of the Earth, my book about the building of a cathedral. So all those difficulties we see Prior Philip and Tom Builder, the mason, and Jack, his stepson, we see them struggling with all these problems. But so my interest started by me saying, first of all, why did they do it? And then how did they do it? You know, you look up, go into a cathedral and look up, and you'll see very high up, there are enormous stones, big, heavy stones. How did they get those stones up there? That's an interesting question, because they, you know, in every big city today, you'll see cranes. Every building site, there are cranes, and all the stuff is moved around by these cranes. But there was a time when that wasn't possible. And in the Middle Ages, they didn't have any good machines, really. The answer to the question, by the way, is that they had something called a great wheel, which had rope around it. And it's huge. It's huge. It's you know, as tall as this room that I'm sitting in. And they would tie that, the rope would be around this wheel, and they would turn the wheel around, and slowly, 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 that would raise the stone all the way up to the top. And there is, in fact, when they finished, sometimes they didn't take the wheel down because it's too difficult. It's too big. And so in Salisbury Cathedral, for example, the wheel is still there. It's called the Great Wheel. And if the people who run the cathedral are feeling kind, they will sometimes take you up, all the way up the tower, and show you this great wheel that was used 800 years ago to lift the stone.
This is great, absolutely great. This shows actually the mechanism of their work then. Why do you think people in general are very attracted of the Middle Ages? Because it's a totally different world of ours today, because now we live in a world that cultivates equality, respect, diversity, freedom. And however, we are very passionate about Middle Ages, where there were conflict, inequality, I don't know, segregation by birth criteria, aristocracy, poor people. Very different world. Is there a void that we feel, a nostalgia maybe, or I don't know, just a fascination for this difference, for this exotic world?
I think what makes it fascinating is that the people of the Middle Ages are not very different from us. Their lives are very different from ours, but they are like us in that the things they're worried about are the things that we're worried about. So they worry about love and sex and family. They worry about work and money. They worry about war and violence. These are the fundamental worries that we all have. Of course, they don't worry. We have many worries that they didn't have. So they don't worry about, you know, catching the train to work every day. That kind of thing never happened to them. But the deep down things. So with all that, we recognize ourselves in those people, but their life is so hard, and it makes our life seem so comfortable and easy. We get our warm houses, our comfortable chairs. You and I are wearing lovely warm cashmere sweaters, and they didn't have that. They had coarse clothes. They must have been cold a lot. So I think we kind of like imagining ourselves in those very difficult circumstances and thinking, how would I have coped with that? Would I be brave? Would I be smart? I think it would be particularly difficult for me, because what would I do in the Middle Ages? They don't want a writer. They didn't have any novels.
Chronic.
Well, true, except that really what writing there was done by priests, and I'm not really suited to the life of a priest, sorry. I would be a terrible farmer. I could never You know, when I was a boy, my father gave me a small patch of the garden to plant flowers in. Nothing grew. Nothing ever grew in my little garden. Nothing. So, you know, I look at the middle, I'd be a terrible soldier. I look at the Middle Ages and I think, you know, it would be very difficult for me even to live, never mind to cope with disease and violence, war, and injustice, as you mentioned. You mentioned injustice, and I think that was a big thing in the Middle Ages, that there was very little in the way of justice. So we sort of, when we read a novel set in the Middle Ages, we feel ourselves back at that time, and we know how hard it would be.
Those experiences, the events that those people were experiencing. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yes, we're fascinated. We're fascinated, and of course, what happens is that my novels and other medieval novels show how those people did, in fact, succeed at things. They succeeded in building the cathedral. They succeeded in feeding their families, and they were brave when they went to war. And that slowly, it happens in World Without End. They start very, very slowly to develop modern medicine, and they begin to understand how sick people can be helped. All that sort of, it's actually, the great thing about it is the achievements of those people, despite all their disadvantages.
Because you just talked about these achievements, I'm wondering what of our culture will remain after 500 years, because it's clear that even from them we have cathedrals, we have art from the Renaissance, then we have a lot of things, architecture that we visit today. What will remain after us? Which are our masterpieces? Because it's very difficult today to I don't know, to imagine which are the things that we create now that will remain and that can give an idea to our descendants about what we created, truthful, valuable, meaningful. Because I cannot see clearly what we create now that will last, I don't know, 100 years, 500 years, 700 years. In your opinion, what is it?
It's, I think you're right. It's very, very difficult. And if we look back, let's look at two Victorian authors, novelists, okay? Charles Dickens and Bulwer Lytton. You may not have heard of Bulwer Lytton.
No.
In the Victorian era, he was just as popular as Dickens and a bit more respected, because he wrote about upper class people and Dickens wrote about working class people. So, and they were friends. And Bulwer Lytton had a house about half a mile from where I am now. In fact, my next door neighbor lives in Bulwer Lytton's house. That's how I know about him. But Dickens used to come here, they were friends. So Dickens used to come here to this village, Nebworth, to see his friend, Bulwer Lytton. And they were equals. Now today, Dickens is regarded as the greatest novelist in the English language. And most people have never heard of Bulwer Lytton. He was very popular, he sold a lot of books, he was well respected by the critics, and he's just vanished. Now, it's easy for us to say that, but at the time, nobody knew that. So if we look at, let's say, the art of today, and we think about, you know, Andy Warhol, maybe, and Picasso, Tracy Emin, it's just impossible to say this will last 1,000 years and that will be forgotten. It's impossible. We can't tell. So I think it's a very good. You're asking a very good question, but I sure don't know the answer.
You cannot say yeah. Now this I could imagine, because all the history has shown that some people and some masterpieces remain, and some names or art pieces are just forgotten, even though they were maybe very appreciated at the time. This we sort of know, but I was wondering, what are the things that really are big enough, created by us now, that can be something something really valuable after hundreds of years? For example, if there will be a Ken Follett after 500 years, who will be interested in how people were living their lives, and how they were, I don't know, teaching, eating, and everything in 2020? Where from will he take his documentation, his research? I don't know, on cloud, on Messenger, on WhatsApp? Where are the archives, our archives? Because I don't know, something written, there won't be a lot, I don't know, because we don't have, we have very, very few journals, not journals, diaries. People don't write diaries anymore. So it's just our Messenger, Facebook, Twitter. Ken Follett after 500 years. Where from will do his research, actually, to write about us? Let's say we're the Middle Ages now.
Well, that's a good point. Maybe there'll be museums, you know, that will show school children how terrible life was in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. For example, I'll say, yes, one thing I can think of that I think future people will look back at us and say how disgusting is eating meat.
Okay.
I eat meat, you know, all the time. I'm not a vegetarian, but I bet
vegetarian.
That they'll teach the children about this awful habit that people used to have of killing perfectly nice animals and then eating them, and the children will say, "Oh, gross! You mean they ate cows?" And the teacher will say, "Yes, they ate cows." And one of the children will run out and puke in the corridor.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's something we can think about more. Thank you. So now very short questions, because this is about you now. I'm very curious if you have a writing ritual, if you have any. So you write in the evening, in the morning, in the afternoon, with music, with silence, coffee, tea. How you do it?
All day. I start early and I finish about now. That's why I do my interviews at this time, usually, because I'm not very creative anymore. I'm really creative first thing in the morning, and so I stop about now. I don't really have any rituals. You know, I'm not superstitious. I don't have to have a certain pencil or anything like that. You see, I started writing on newspapers, and you know, you can't. In the newspaper office, you can't say, "Would everybody please be quiet because I'm writing," or "I can't write this because I haven't got my pencil." So I don't have any of that stuff.
But you write every day. You have a discipline.
Monday to Friday. I take weekends off now. Usually, not always. Sometimes I work Saturday and Sunday if I'm finishing something and I'm really excited about it, you know. But normally Monday to Friday.
What do you do if you're not feeling very inspired in a certain
moment?
You stop.
Well, I write anyway. I write anyway, and then the next day I fix it up. It does happen that there are some days when you don't feel very inspired, but it's best to press on and then look at it the next day and say, okay, this isn't very good. How can it be made good? But the thing is, if you write something that's not very good, you still solve some problems. You still answer questions. You know, people walk in and out of rooms, or you say what somebody's wearing, or you say what the weather is. You write, you progress the story, and then you just have to look back and decide what the weaknesses are and change them.
So it's better to write something than not to write at all because you don't feel inspired.
Always. Better to write something mediocre than to spend the whole day looking at the screen and have nothing at the end of it, because it's demoralizing as well if you don't actually write anything down.
You say, could I write a story about that? So this is the question that you say that stands at the beginning of all your novels. So when the answer is clearly yes, what's the first thing you do then?
Well, I would usually write something down, because it's an idea at this stage, and it's probably only a few words, might be 3 paragraphs, or even just 1 sentence. But I write something down, and then I start asking myself questions. Why did this happen? Who was it? Who did it? What happened before? What happened after? Who else was involved? And I ask myself those questions. And so it grows from just a few sentences. And the next day it's a whole page, and the next day it's 2 pages, the next day it's 5 pages, and that's how it and that's how it grows. And then at some point, first of all, I just invent things, and then I start saying, yeah, but who cares? Why would anybody want to read this? Is this boring? And that's when I start to get critical, and I start to think, okay, if that's not good enough, what's a better way to do it?
Who's your first reader, and who's your toughest critic?
Well, I have a lot of readers. Obviously, I have editors in London and New York. I have friends, and some of my family like to read my drafts, and some of them are really good. I've got a daughter who's a television director. She directs television drama in Hollywood.
When reading, I think she's
tough. And she's very good. Yes, she really understands story. If you think about television, you know, television is very demanding, because you must never have 10 boring seconds. Now, in a book, you shouldn't have a boring page, but you might have a boring paragraph, and you might get away with it. Television, the viewer can just turn it off, or more likely, change to another channel. So you can lose. So in television, they're desperate not to lose the viewer. And you do that by making sure that the story never slows up. It never gets dull. It keeps changing and moving like that. So television drama is a really good model for a novelist, by the way that it just never lets up.
What was the funniest feedback that you got after someone read your draft?
I get. I'll tell you something that somebody said after buying the book. It was a letter from a fan letter in the days when you still used to write letters on paper, and this woman wrote to say that she had just read Lie Down with Lions, and she said, I enjoyed it so much, and I just had to let you know how good it is, and thank you for writing it. And then she put, P.S. If the love scene is based on your own experience, please call this number next time you're in California.
Oh, good. So that was a good.
Don't ask. Of course, I never phoned that number.
Oh, great! Oh,
that was a pretty good. I thought that was a pretty good compliment.
Yeah, a good page in your novel. Good. Okay. Something, I don't know if you know a lot of things about Romania, but I would be very curious if there is a subject in our history that you find inspiring, that you are interested in.
Well, not that I know of, but you could give me a suggestion. What's the most dramatic thing that happened in Romanian history?
Oh, there are lots of moments, but in my opinion, I would suggest you to read about King Michael.
Okay.
He's a very strong character. He died a few years ago. A very decent, courageous man, beautiful man. I always say that in his maybe adolescence, when he was a teenager and a young man, he could be played by I don't know, maybe by Brad Pitt, if there would be.
Okay.
Yeah. He was a very brave man that fought Stalin and Hitler. He was very courageous, and he was a really strong figure in the Romanian royal family. And
Okay.
we had him among us a lot of time, even if Romania during the communist period actually sent him in exile, and we didn't have a king in the country, but we had a king that thought every single day of his life at us. So it's a very interesting character. And also maybe Vlad Tepes, Dracula. Of course, you've heard of Dracula. It's the best known maybe figure in Romanian history. But I would suggest you King Michael, because he was a great figure. Maybe my last question. I know that on 5th of June is your birthday, and I want to ask you, what do you wish for this year for your birthday, for you and for your family?
Oh, well, the main thing is about my family is that I want to see them. Actually, on my birthday this year, I will be able to see some of them, the ones who still live in England, I will be able to see, and they're coming here to this house for lunch. My birthday is a Saturday, the 5th of June is a Saturday. So they will come here and we'll have lunch and wine and just talk. I have 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren, all living in California.
Wow.
And of course, I haven't seen them for a long time. And some of the, 4 of my grandchildren are like 11, 12, 13 years old. So they're changing so fast now. And I've missed all this for the last year, more than a year now. I haven't been able to see them. But I'm hoping that before the end of this year, I will be able to fly to California and see them.
Thank you very much. And I think it's a privilege that you have such a beautiful family and big family. And now you are going to be able to be together for your birthday. And I think this is marvelous. Thank you for this interview. It was a great pleasure for us. And in the end, I want to tell you, you have a great library and I love it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.